Hi everyone, welcome to my channel if you're new here, welcome back to my channel if you're a returning viewer or subscriber. In today's video I'm going to be talking you through all the books that I read in November and my thoughts on each of them. I only read 5 books in November, but I had a very busy month. I went travelling twice. I went to Ireland for 3 or 4 days the first time, and then I went to Florida for a week, and those trips were almost back to back. It was a very busy month. I was kind of all over the place, literally. That meant that I didn't manage to get to as many books as I hoped I would, or as many of my kind of like seasonal reads that I wanted to, but I'm still happy with 5 because, like I said, it was a really hectic month and I still managed to read amongst it. But yeah, that is what today's video is going to be. I'm wearing this scarf shawl situation because it's freezing my house, and I thought this video is kind of kicking off the actual like chunk of the festive season, because we're saying goodbye to November and welcoming in December and all the exciting end of the year content that I have planned. So without further ado, let's just get on to the video. So in October or November, I don't remember what month it was, I did a post on Instagram, on my bookstagram, 10 books that I wanted to read before the end of the year, where I basically ran through exactly that 10 books that I wanted to read before the end of 2023. Well, now I'm going to properly address that list because I'm definitely not going to get through all those books, but I did want to talk about one book that I mentioned on that list, and that was My Rock and Roll Friend by Tracy Thorn. You might be thinking, wow, you did actually read one of the books on the list. No, I did not. I DNF'd this book, and what's funny is that, what's kind of sad, the little note I put next to this book was that I was refusing to DNF it, but I did in fact DNF it. I got a good chunk into this book. I think I only had like 70 pages left, but I was just like, I can't do this to myself anymore. I know that this is stopping me from reading other books. I would hopefully enjoy it more than this one. So this book is written by Tracy Thorn, and she wrote it about her best friend, Lily Morrison, who was in a band called The Go-Between. It's a kind of indie punk band in the 80s. This book then looks at Lindy's life, but particularly her life in music through a feminist viewpoint, particularly because she was a drummer, which is a typically kind of like masculine male role within a band. It's obvious that Lindy did receive quite a lot of hate for her position within the band, within the kind of like 80s society of misogynistic views, particularly within music. The reason why I DNF'd this book was because it was so boring. I can't even explain to you. The first part I found really interesting. I really liked the fact that Lindy's Australian, but she moves to the UK. I too am Australian, but I've lived in the UK for the majority of my life, but all my family and all my roots are very much in Australia still. I'd never ever see depictions of kind of like immigration in that way, from like a culture that's in some ways very similar to the UK, but also very different. It has the same language, lots of people originally actually came from the UK, but there are still a lot of differences, and I really loved seeing that little journey of Lindy's life. I think that Lindy is a very interesting person. I just think the way that Tracy told her story was not. The book felt like it was written more from like a fangirl than from a bestie. I know that obviously this book has had to have been run by Lindy in order to be published, but this book felt like there were so many assumptions made about Lindy and so many like little stories and anecdotes told about Lindy's life that felt more like they were being kind of this, I don't want to say this in like she's lying, but like fabricated, exaggerated, or much expanded upon that didn't actually really happen in Lindy's life. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but that's just the way it read. I think this book would have worked better for me if I was familiar with the characters going into this book. I'd heard of Lindy before, and I'd had the Go-Betweens, but I'd never listened to any of her music or any of Tracy Thorn's music either, or read anything previous from her. But I'm told that she's a great writer, so I feel like this was just like not the book for her, maybe, and definitely not the book for me. So I did rate this one. I gave it 2 stars. Maybe I should give it 2.5, or maybe I shouldn't rate it all because it's the DNF. But yeah, that was that book, and it is currently being on hold. If you want it, it's up on my Depop. The next book that I read in November was Bound by Treason. I bought this book in Stop Your Kindle Day, which is basically a day where a bunch of romance Kindle books become free. So I just kind of picked up whatever sounded slightly interesting to me. I don't actually remember exactly what this book is about. Essentially, we have a queen, and she is married to a dragon shifter. That's the first thing we need to unpack. They together have children. Each one of this queen's children have died across like a few months, so she's very suspicious about what's going on, and she thinks that someone within the court must have had involvement in like the killing of her children. She has a servant, I can't remember what his exact title is, but he is her childhood best friend, and that's where the little romance thing is. Her dragon husband flies off. We don't see him for most of the book, so it's just about kind of like love interest servant guy and the queen trying to figure out what's happened while trying to not annoy the husband, despite them having this little flirtation. The writing in this book was truly tragic. What's kind of surprising is that there's a series of these books that were called Bound by Blank, and there's about 10 of them. They're meant to have been written by authors who are very prolific and very kind of well respected within the romantasy genre, but the writing in this was so bad. This woman felt like she'd never written anything in her life, and she just like, I don't even know, it was not good. The plot was also really boring. It was like so basic. I just didn't really have any investment in that either. And also, this is like the major thing that I feel like people are gonna have an issue with, is that despite this being a romance fantasy, essentially a romance book that just happens to have fantastical elements, there was little to no romance. Flirtation that honestly could just be seen as like the servant being like really loyal to his queen, and then there's one moment where they're starting to like make out right at the end of the book, and then they're interrupted and we never revisit that. So I just think if you're signing up for this book because you're wanting to read it for romantic elements, don't, because the romance is really not there. There are like a million different creatures in this book. Fairies, werewolves, vampires, there are dragons, there are pixies, there are witches, like literally every single possible creature was in this. I felt like the magic system and just like the whole world and like the world building in general was really confused through this book. I'm not sure whether the other books in the series leads on from this story, like it kind of explains what happened in this or set down some lore for the world, because what we got in this was just so confused and just felt like there was no order to anything. I'm slightly scared because I own the other books, but I also got all of them for free, so if I start the next one and it's just feeling like the same kind of thing, then I might DNF the whole series and delete them off my Kindle. For now, this one was a very solid 2 stars. Okay, I promised there were a couple of books that I enjoyed in the month of November, but the next book we're going to talk about is another one that I didn't enjoy. However, I actually didn't end up rating it just because I didn't know what to do with it. So the next book that I read in the month was Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This is I was gonna say super well loved, but like polarizing book for a lot of people, which means that people either tend to literally obsess over it and it becomes their favorite book of all time, or they really don't see anything special and in fact find it a little bit problematic. I fell definitely towards this side, but not enough to give it like a bad rating. So Magnolia Parks primarily follows Magnolia Parks, that's her name, and her on and off boyfriend BJ Valentine. The fact that the author named her character BJ and there's never any mention to the associations with his name, despite this book being set in England, is a little bit shocking. These two characters are very, very wealthy and they live in high society London. They have careers where they essentially don't need any of the money that they make off of what they do because they just have so much family wealth and they're just like ridiculously privileged essentially. So you start off with these characters who unfortunately, even though having a lot of privilege obviously doesn't automatically equate to you being a brat, that's what this book portrays. Like it definitely feels like these characters are very materialistic, very self-centered. I guess this is a little bit more materialistic, but very like detached from reality. It's about their lives, about their spending habits, but it's mostly about their relationship with each other and also their relationship with their family and their relationship with their friends. All the while you're uncovering this big event that happened in their past that caused them to break up and to never want to fully commit to each other again, but they are still like deeply in love at the core of it, or deeply kind of attached to each other. To sum it up, it basically felt like if either of these characters had gone to therapy, gone through like a few sessions of that, then they would have very happily packed their bags and left on their way to living a much healthier life away from the other person. But that obviously never happened. I think the overall takeaway from this book is it just wasn't for me. This might be a little bit controversial to say, but I feel like a lot of people who review this book have had or are in very healthy relationships, which means that they can read something like this as like entertainment and as drama and gossip and stuff like that. But if you have ever experienced anything like this relationship dynamic, particularly between Magnolia and BJ, emotional manipulation of it, then this book doesn't lend itself as like a relatable comfort read. It feels like you're trapping yourself in your own emotions, which on one side I felt really difficult to read. On the other side, opened me up completely to how ridiculously petty and stupid it is to waste your time kind of pulling at people's emotional strings in order to make them understand how you feel. Which I know is the most basic thing, but like it just highlights how ridiculous this drama is, how beautiful like having a healthy relationship is, and the lack of healthy relationships in this book is just like enormous. No single character has a healthy relationship. So yeah, I wrote down the only positive is that it made me realize how stupid it is to be petty over your feelings. Will I continue the series? I honestly don't know. I didn't hate this book. I also didn't love it. I did also read this on audiobook, I feel like I should say. It was my first book that I read through Spotify's new audiobook service of like premium subscribers get like 15 hours of free audiobooks per month. So I read it via that and I really enjoyed that experience. I thought it was a really good audiobook. This book is quite famous for its writing and I feel like I glossed over some of those lines just because I was listening to it, which actually I think if I'd been physically reading it, I would have been able to pause and like actually ponder them and probably enjoy the book a little bit better. If you didn't already know how the series worked, Magnolia Parks 1 and Daisy Hates 1 follow the exact same timeline but just focus on different characters, and then Magnolia Parks 2 and Daisy Hates 2 do the exact same thing. Their books kind of mirror each other and they fill in the gaps for each other. I just watched Destiny's video where she talked about her favourite series of the year, and she was not a fan of Magnolia Parks, but she reckons that she's a Daisy Hates girly, and she said that you're either one or the other. So I feel like I could be more invested in the Daisy Hates storyline just because I didn't enjoy Magnolia Parks as much. I'm not sure whether I'm gonna bother reading it. So I don't know. I had so much hype about this series. I was so excited for it. I was ready to fork out 50 quid and buy the entire series, but I'm very glad I didn't. The first book just wasn't a hit for me, basically. But yeah, I might have preferred it if I physically read it. That's Magnolia Parks. I kind of don't know how to feel about it, which is why I didn't feel like I wanted to rate it, because like I said at the beginning, overall I'd say it wasn't a little bit of a negative experience, but at the same time I don't feel kind of convicted enough to give it like a 2-star or something. So yeah, that's Magnolia Parks. We'll see about whether I end up continuing the series. Okay friends, the next book that I read in the month of November was Flawless by Elsie Silver. And spoiler, but I love this book. This is the first book in the Chestnut Spring series, which is a series of interconnected standalone romance books all set on a ranch in Canada. Think cowboys, think bull riders, think big wholesome family living out in the countryside with their horses vibes. That's what you get in this book. So in this particular one, we're following Rhett and Summer. Rhett is a professional bull rider. Just a quick side note, not a fan of bull riding. I think it's a horrible sport. I have to not focus on those scenes. I think it's awful, but like, you know, if you're also someone who doesn't like that, then you might dislike this book because it does have a little bit of focus on that, but it doesn't go too much into depth. It's definitely more about their romance, obviously. That's just like a bit of a subplot. So Rhett is a professional bull rider, very much at the top of his game, very successful. So he has lots of sponsorships. He has a big sponsorship with a dairy company where he's promoting their products, and in one of the clips he takes a big sip of the milk drink and says some hot spiel about how much he loves the company. What happens is they leave the mic running and he speaks to his friend and laughs about the fact that he actually hates milk. He hates all dairy products. He essentially sabotages his sponsorship. So his sponsor drops him and he's very upset about this, very annoyed about like the whole industry, sick of it. He's also like getting quite old for his career, and he's very kind of riled up and upset about this, and it actually results in him punching a news reporter or journalist, which is obviously not, you know, that's not ideal for your public image. His agent calls him in and he's like, dude, you absolutely like cannot be doing that. You're gonna lose all your sponsorships, like we're really on the brink here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trust my daughter, who works for this company, for this agency, to come and stay with you on the ranch and to basically make sure that all your interviews and all your performances and everything like that goes smoothly and well, and you kind of retain but also like promote this idea of being a really wholesome family country cowboy. Summer is obviously the agent's daughter, so she goes to live with Rhett, and I know that sounds unrealistic, but actually the way that it read didn't feel like that at all. Summer was very focused on her job. She was very focused in making Rhett the best at what he was, and I really appreciated that. So maybe I do like romances. I know, it's kind of crazy. I genuinely have never loved a contemporary romance book. The only other book that I've also enjoyed like to a similar amount as Flawless was People With Me on Vacation by Emily Henry, but that book is kind of 50% literary fiction, 50% romance. This book was 100% contemporary romance. Still loved it. I know it's kind of genuinely shocking. I really thought that this genre just wasn't for me because I've read so many books that have genuinely been terrible. The vibes were absolutely 10 out of 10. The family and the found family within the story, the relationships between the brothers, the banter and the kind of like deep love despite everything that they share. I just felt like, you know, I felt like I was staying on this farm. Every single kind of like aspect of the setting and the vibes of the story was just it for me. I also adored Rhett. I just love men in books who seem really cocky and like annoying, and then you actually peel back the layers and you realize that they're like an absolute softie inside. So loving and caring and thoughtful, and that the world's actually got them all wrong. I really love that whole narrative, and that's definitely what Rhett was. Everyone perceived him as this really arrogant, annoying, rich, famous man, and actually he was nothing like that at all, although he was still rich. He was still rich and famous. The other thing is that I generally hate men in romance books because they're so possessive. Like for some reason romance authors think to make a male character attractive they need to make him super possessive and controlling, but there's this whole part in this book where Rhett tells Summer that he's not possessive, he's protective, which without spoiling things ties in a little bit with the third act conflict, and usually the third act conflict is really unnecessary and annoying, but I felt like this was a really important feature of this book. It tied in with personal things that Summer was dealing with, but also helped to like understand Rhett's character and to show that him standing up for her was done out of love and not through him trying to control her. And I really loved the kind of like discussion of that distinction between possessiveness and protectiveness, because so many of the men in romance books, like I said, are just possessive, but he actually really cared for her and he wanted the best for her, and that's the reason why he acted in a way that at first she found a bit much because she just didn't understand it. So unlike the other books, this book just worked really well for me. I'm excited to read the rest of the series. I don't think I want to read most, if not all of them, but I do think this one is still going to be my favourite. It's just like aligned with everything I'm interested in reading in romance novels. So that is Flawless by Elsie Silver. A very, very pleasant surprise. These books are a little bit spicy. The spice scenes were not bad though. I don't mind spice if the characters love each other, and it was very evident in these, and particularly within those scenes, that the characters deeply care for each other, which I really loved. And the final book that I read in the month of November was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is a very different vibe from everything we've been mentioning. This is an adult dark academia fantasy book, and it is set in Yale. We're following Alex Stern, and she is admitted to Yale as a student, as an undergrad. She comes from a very kind of tragic, difficult past with involvement in drugs, and she lost her best friend. She was a sole survivor in a mass homicide. Obviously has come from a very like dark, difficult past, and she's taken on by Yale because she has the ability to see greys, which are essentially ghosts in this world. Yale has a bunch of secret societies. The greys are kind of attracted to the rituals that societies perform. So Alex is given this fresh start, but also required to kind of monitor the activities of the societies, make sure that the greys are not kind of overstepping. The concept is fantastic, so good. It's based on kind of like these conspiracy theories about Yale and about the societies and everything like that, which I just think is so fascinating and so much fun. I've actually been to Yale. I wasn't a student, I visited the campus. It felt like vivid, this book, and I really loved the atmosphere and the vibe. The whole dark academia kind of idea about this book was so good, but overall I thought it was just messy, and I feel like this book just needed a little more time, a little more editing. I don't know, I was disappointed with like how much potential this book had. So I love the concept, I love the characters, I thought the plot was interesting, but again everything just kind of was a little bit off. This, I believe, was Leigh Bardugo's adult debut. She's written a bunch of YA. She wrote the Shadow and Bone series, which was not great, but she then wrote the Six Crows duology, which I loved. Two of my favorite books of all time, both absolutely kind of like 6-star reads. So when I heard back in 2018, 2019 that she was coming out with an adult book, I was very excited to pick it up. I thought that this would like automatically be like whatever Six of Crows was, but just like on steroids, because we are able to explore kind of darker themes. But I actually found this book read really immaturely, and I think actually the only things that kind of made this adult were the references to like sex and drugs, and also the language used and things like that. But there were scenes that just seemed really kind of juvenile. First of all, the magic system just felt like it was whatever she wanted, and there were a couple of moments, like little paragraphs that explained things that I found fascinating, but we just didn't go into a lot of depth. This is the first book in a series, so I feel like that could be explored in the later books, but I just felt like in this book we needed to be setting up and like establishing the magic system in order to make this book kind of make sense, or make the whole series make sense. There is like this mystery running throughout this book. We're first of all trying to find where Alex's mentor has gone, because he's gone missing, and we're also trying to solve a murder mystery, as well as kind of like do this whole monitoring of the secret societies. So we do have a couple of villains in this book, and the villains monologued, which I just think is so silly and so unrealistic, and so, I don't know, it made it feel like a kid's book. So overall I gave Ninth House a 3 stars. I was really hoping to love it more than that, but there's nothing you can do. I am kind of uninterested enough to not want to read the sequel to this book. It came out early this year, but I just don't think that this series is kind of worth continuing for me, and I don't love the direction that's going to go into either. But I'm glad to finally have read this, because I bought this in release week, which was, I can't remember which month, but it was some month in autumn 2019. The fact this has been on my shelves that long unread is crazy, so I'm glad to have finally read this, and again will be on hold. Although I think I'm going to put this one up on eBay, because I've got the exclusive edition, just this gorgeous cover. There's no need for me to hold on to this lovely copy when people who actually enjoyed the book might want to own this special edition. So there you have it. Those are the 5 books I managed to read in the month of November. Overall, a bit of a mixed reading month. We had a few quite bad books, and we had one great book and then one like middle of the road one, so definitely a mixed month. It's amazing to have that surprise of Flawless, like that was so special, and also to have finally ticked Ninth House off my TBR. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up so that's how I can tell that you did, and I'll see you very soon in a couple of days for another review. Bye bye.